Welcome, this is Dr. Hisham Said. This is the fourth video of the series on construction cost estimate. And kind of it's the first part of the subtopic, which is detailed cost estimate. So we'll cover it over 3 videos here. This is the first one. So in the first one here, we'll introduce the idea of developing detailed estimates compared to in the previous video we learned about the rough order of magnitude or some also people call it preliminary estimate, but detailed estimate is really from its name you're really pay attention to every detail of the estimate in terms of the quantity and also what makes up the cost. So here you need to think about your bid. So when you submit a bid for a project, you look at the price, not only the cost. So the price here includes the cost plus markup. So in this video and the next video, we'll learn about cost. And the following video, the last video of the series, we'll learn about markup and the indirect cost. So there are different pieces here, so we'll have to break it down over multiple videos. So bid price equals to cost plus markup. Markup equals to contingency plus financial charge plus, of course, profit. Cost includes direct cost, indirect cost. Direct cost is any cost that you can directly assign to one of the activities in your WBS or work breakdown structure. So if you see an excavation on site, so I can relate to it the trucks that are moving the dirt, the excavator that's digging, the laborer that's flagging and standing on the site, stopping cars for the trucks going out and in. So anything that I can directly relate to this excavation activity is called direct cost. Now there are costs that are indirect, so we'll learn more about this, but from its name, it's something that you cannot directly relate to one of the activities on the site. So digging into direct costs, there is material, labor, equipment, subcontractors. So in this video, we'll learn about labor cost. So this is the first component of the direct cost, which is part of the total cost, which is part of the bid price. So the labor cost includes these components. The basic wage. So the laborers have basic wages, different labor trade has different basic wages, but there's a lot on top of this basic wage. So on top of it, there is fringe benefits. So pension, health insurance, vacation, all these, if you're in a big company, maybe there's stock option. So there are a lot of benefits that you can get, and all of these cost money. You need to attract talent and attract people, so there is benefits that you pay as an employer, as a contractor for your workers. There is the worker comp, which is kind of a occupational hazard insurance, different than the health insurance. So for those workers on site, if there's anything due to injuries due to the job, then they are covered by the worker comp. There's other overhead that you pay, so Social Security, unemployment tax, a lot of things you pay for your workers. They don't see it, they don't feel it, but you as a company, as a contractor, pay for it. And there is premium, so for every extra hour, overtime, double extra time, so they're working after hours or working on weekends or holidays, they have different premiums. So you can see here, for 8 hours a day, for 5 days a week, you don't have any premium, it's 100%. But whenever you increase the number of hours or the number of days, your premium goes pretty fast. So they get the base wage if you work 8 hours 5 days a week, but anything more, you need to adjust for that. So labor cost here, we'll use RSMeans, either the book or the online reference. So we'll use the RSMeans building construction cost data, which is the detailed for detailed estimate compared to the square foot cost data, which is another book. So these are the steps we'll go through. So first one is you need to identify the line item in the book that refers to the description of the activity you're estimating. So in the course, in quiz or exam, I will give you the description, but this description comes in real life from your own breakdown and identification of the scope of the project. So in this example here, we have an excavation activity. It's a bulk excavation, means it's a big amount of excavation. It's not like focus on an area or trench. So it's a bulk excavation of clay soil. Type of soil makes a difference here. With 11 cubic yards elevated scrapers. So it's one type of earth moving equipment. It's not like a truck, but it acts like a truck. It loads itself without the help of an excavator. So just Google on YouTube scrapers, you will see this equipment. It's kind of like scooping the soil like ice cream. So it works with a push dozer. So we all know the dozers. Dozer here is working, and then these scrapers are traveling back and forth, moving the dirt over 1,500 hole distance. So this is a description. Where do you come up with this description? By reading the project documents, coming up with a construction method, means a method, you have to be familiar with that, and making your mind on, I'm using scrapers with the help of a dozer, and I know that the project deals with the clay soil, and by looking at the plans, I know the location of the site, I know the dump site where I'm moving dirt, so you build up that description. The quantity from quantity takeoff is 10,000 bank cubic yards. BCW stands for bank cubic yards. So we'll not get into details. There's loose cubic yards, bank cubic yards. This is covered in a different course, but it's a unit for measuring the soil in a specific state, which is the bank state, which is the natural state of the soil, without loosening it when you dig. So that's a description. I need to identify which line item in the book matches with that. So let's move to the book and see how the pages are organized. So this is half of the page. Like you will see, the page is like that. So I'm showing half of it here. Going back here, remember ours means detailed cost estimate follows a CSI master format. The square foot data or cost rate follows the uni format. So uni format versus master format. You need to know the difference. Uni format is mostly for square foot. Master format is for detailed estimate. So you see here, 03 is concrete. 0330 is cast in place concrete. 033053 is miscellaneous cast in place concrete. You keep detailing it until you reach one line item, a specific line item, and you read it actually backward. So let's say this line item 0510, which actually the full code for it is 03 30 53 40 05 10. So it refers to chimney foundations 3,500 psi under 5 cubic yards the size, not over. So this cancels the over 5 cubic yards. So it's not beams. You go all the way to the upper level here. It includes forms, 4 uses of the forms. So you use them 4 times and then throw them or recycle them. It's grade 60 rebar. It includes rebar. It includes the concrete. It's including placing and finishing the concrete, unless it's mentioned otherwise in the below detailed items. So this is how you read line item. The second half of the page is detailing the cost and the production rate. So if I go here to this page here, I know, like we'll see more when we deal with the next steps of the estimate. But for every line item, you will know like what crew you're using, what's the production rate per day, what are the costs per material, per labor, per equipment, total cost, and then there is something called total, including overhead and profit. So total is bare cost. It doesn't include overhead and profit. You use that if you're dealing with detailed cost estimate of self-performed work. So the work you do by your own workers, the one that you're responsible for directly. This column here, total including overhead and profit, this one is you use it for the work that's done by your subcontractors. So they do the work, they add their own overhead and profit, and then they give it to you to include in your own bid. So And in our case here, we're doing detailed estimate of self-perform, so we'll deal with the bare cost and we'll adjust it and add overhead to each one of the material, labor, and equipment. In our case here in this video, we're dealing with the labor. So by the description here, this description of the bulk excavation, it matches with this. It's a clay 1500 hole, it's elevated scrapers, 11 cubic yard size, with a dozer of a quarter cubic yard. You're dealing with not sand and gravel. You see here it's substituted by clay, and it's 1500 feet hole, the same as this one. And it's bulk excavation scrapers. So the line item, you read it here, is 312316.50 0500. That's the line item. So when you report in your estimate what line item you picked, you just write the code here. So the code of the line item that you picked. Next, you identify the crew that suggested by the line item you picked. So for the one we picked here, it's crew B33F. So it goes all the way to other line items here. There's another page full of all the crews that you have. So B33F, that's the crew, and it's made up of one equipment operator. It's a medium-sized equipment. 0.5 laborers, so we'll talk about what does it mean, 0.5. 0.25 equipment operator. One elevated scraper, remember, it's the excavation here is done by scrapers. And then 0.25 dozer. So actually the quarter here means that it's a quarter of dozer. So now the question is, what does it mean 0.5 laborer, 0.25 equipment operator? And let's first match here. So this is one equipment operator is running the scraper, one matching with one. 0.25 equipment operator is running the 0.25 dozer. And then you have 0.5 laborer just walking around, flagging and directing the equipment. So what does it mean 0.5 labor? It means that for this crew to work, if you observe this laborer, you will find that they are contributing to the work only 0.5 of their time. The other time is either they're idle or they are used on the site in other tasks. So this is the meaning of it. So think about it. This laborer is directing the scrapers, right? So the scrapers are the one that's continuously running back and forth. So it's one here means they're working every minute of their time is actually contributing to the production. But the laborer, they point, they flag, they direct the scraper to load, and once the scraper leaves, the laborer here is just hanging around, waiting. So it's a wasted time, unless the people on the site recognize that and know that, and they say, you know what, this labor I will use the other half of it in other task, in other activity. So this is the meaning. It's not like you're cutting half of the labor part of the crew. It just half of the time of this labor is actually contributing to the production of this crew. The other half is either wasted or utilized in other things. So you can see that even like for the equipment operator, this one, $47.5 per hour. If you multiply this by 8 hours a day, which is the typical shift, this will give you 380. But if you do the same for the 0.5 laborer, 35.45 times 8 will not be 141.8. But you have to divide over 2 to end up with that. So the cost here is reflecting that you're only using 0.5 laborer in that crew, or effectively you're only benefiting from only half of the time of this labor. Same thing for the equipment operator. So this $95 daily cost of this labor in the crew is equal to 47.5 times 8 hours a day times 0.25, because this equipment operator is only working quarter of the time, or effectively contributing to quarter of the time of the production of this crew. Scrapers, dozers, they're given here as daily cost. This is the bare cost. This is including overhead and profit. So you see the prices here are increased to include overhead and profit. And this is the cost per labor hour. So this is another way of representing the data. This is mainly for subcontractors. They like to talk cost per labor hour. So we'll not go cover that right in detail. So as simulating the detailed estimate is usually done by general contractors. So we can answer this question here. What does it mean to have a 0.5 labor in the crew? It's just a way to say that pay attention. I'm only accounting for half of the time of this labor in this crew. The other half, if the labor is in hanging on the site, you're actually paying the other half, but it's not reflected in the cost of this specific activity. And this is why there's a difference between cost estimate and cost budgeting, because budgeting is now looking in detail of the crews and how they are utilized and moving the uses of these crews and laborers and even the costs between different activities in the time of the execution. So if I look at this number here, this total of the line item here is suggesting that the total of labor and equipment is equal to 5.98. So where we come up with this number, it's equal to the daily cost of the crew divided by the daily production of the crew, or the daily output. So if you divide this number, 2,243.05, divided by the daily output, which is 375, you'll end up with 598. I will leave it to you to figure out how they come up with these two other numbers. The labor cost, 1.64, and 4.34 for the equipment. But I gave you a hint of how it's calculated for the total. Now, what we're doing is not using the total, because we're doing detailed estimate, labor, equipment, material, and sub. So I will use this 1.64 because I'm calculating the labor cost. So the labor cost for this activity will be 1.64 per cubic yards. It's bare costs, so I need to adjust for that to account for different things. First thing I need to adjust for is the city. So refer to the previous video on how to adjust cost for city, location, and the time. Let's say that you're using here the correct reference year for the cost estimate, so we're not adjusting for time, we're adjusting for location. Location here is San Jose. And remember, labor is an installation part of the cost. So I'm referring to the cost here that is referring to the line item or the division matching with the line item I have. So 31 to 34 divisions here, which is matching with that one. I'm looking at this row of the column. I'm not looking at 03 because this is more detailed here. This is more relevant to my line item. So this means that your city index is 100, which means that I'm not adjusting anything. The city index is equal to 1. So I'm adjusting for location. I adjust for the time if I'm using an older version of RS means. And then next I would adjust for the overhead of the labor, the workers. The workers come with a lot of overhead. So the first major overhead is worker comp. So this page here is the back page or the back cover of the book. And it shows here the different trades, different worker types, and their different overheads. Now we're covering only B and C, columns B and C. Column B is worker comp. So remember, it's the insurance that covers the workers, their injuries, if they're due to their work. You see there are different percentages. High, low. You can see here the highest, I guess, is this. Painters, structural steel, 42. This means that you add on top of their base rate 40%, 42%. It's a lot of money. So why is that? Because they're hanging in the air, painting steel. If you compare this to, let's say, elevator constructors, it's only 5%. There's some risk, but it's not compared to steel painters or plumbers. So there are different levels of risk for every trade that's reflected in the worker comp insurance. And then there's the fixed overhead for all trades. You always pay, Social Security, you always pay unemployment. So all of the taxes and fees you pay for your workers. So it's around $18 in this case here. So you add the two values here for every worker trade that you have in the trade and the crew. So for example, carpenters, you have here, where are carpenters? This one. So you have 15.1 worker comp. So it's 0.151 plus 17.9%, which is 0.179. Add these to 1, so you're actually adjusting your base rate by 1.33 factor, or you're increasing your base rate by 33%. This is the real cost here. You're not only paying, or the company doesn't feel only the cost of the base hourly cost of the laborers, but also whatever overhead and taxes and worker comp they need to pay. And here, bare cost here includes already a fringe benefits. So remember, we talked about fringe benefits. Here, it's assumed to be included. Now, remember, we have crew, this crew here, B33F. Now, I have different traits. I have equipment operators, I have laborer. So what TOF value I should use? So in this case here, we will use what we call the weighted average. So we'll look at the corresponding trade that we have represented in the crew. So we have equipment operator, and we have common laborer. And I pick every one of these trades. I will identify the total overhead factor. So this is for the laborers, this is for the equipment operators, the medium size. So I have 1.33 adjustment for the laborers, 1.27 adjustment for the equipment operators. Now I will use the numbers in the crew and the hourly rate for each one as a weight for the TOF value. So for the laborers, I have 0.5 in the crew, and the rate for each is 35.45 times the factor that I have, plus I have 1.25 equipment operators times their hourly rate times the TOF value. And then I divide by, the number and hourly rate of each add up. So kind of I'm literally doing weighted average here, using the number of workers and the rates and the crew. And I end up here with kind of a collective TOF value, total overhead factor, of 1.25 value here. So this is the summary of all the steps I had here. So this, in summary here, I adjust the labor unit cost. This is the bare cost. The city location is no change. And I adjust for the overhead of the workers. So I end up with $2.11 per pan cubic yards for the laborers of this crew. If I want to calculate for the total scope of the activity, which is 10,000 pan cubic yards, I multiply that by the adjusted labor factor, labor rate, and that will give you 21,100. So this is the total cost of the workers in this activity, excavation activity. So we're done with the labor. It's actually one of the intensive part of cost estimate if you're doing detailed estimate. If you're doing detailed estimate, this means you are hiring people, workers. You're not subbing, you're not outsourcing the work to subs. So it's a lot of responsibility, it's a lot of cost also to account for, and this is the right way to do it. Otherwise, you will actually base your estimate on bare costs and then find out you're paying all of this overhead that you end up paying. So it's very critical to account for all of this loaded labor rate instead of the bare labor rate. It will not be that intense for the equipment, material, and subs, so we'll see that in the next video. Thanks for watching, and take care of yourself and those around you.